bread of life, sent down from glory. Many things you were on earth, a holy king, a carpenter, but you are the living word. Say it now. Come on.
Sent down from glory.
Many things you were on earth, a holy king, a carpenter. Come on, Houston, you can say it one time with us. Bread sent down from glory. Many things. Come on, somebody say it.
Many things you were on earth, a holy king, a carpenter. You are the living
Awesome ruler, Gentile redeemer. God with us,
the living truth, and what a friend we have in you.
you are an awesome ruler, Gentile redeemer. God with us, yeah, the living truth, yeah, what a friend. But when we put it all together, this is what we like to call you. Jesus, Jesus. That's what we call you, yeah. You were born in a manger, but on a tree you died to save his man. Jesus. That's what we call you. You were born in a manger, but on a tree you died to save your humanity. Can you take it up from there? Jesus. That's what we call you, Jesus. Manger born, but on a tree you died to save humanity. Jesus. I know we call you manger born, yeah, but on a tree you died to save somebody. When I can't say nothing else, I like to say, oh, 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 I wonder, can I get the saints all over the world to say, oh, no matter where you find yourself, say it. Come on, somebody. Can you say it one more time? Oh, yeah. Come on, say it. Lift your voice and say it. Now let's call him one more time and say, Jesus, that's what we call you, Jesus. Jesus. Oh.
Greetings, great. I am your king, Clifford Jefferson, descended and ascended down from the house of Godfrey under the Godfrey the fifth kind of Van Jew, father of John, Henry II, and Richard I. Also son of Folk, ruler of Jerusalem, descended down from the house of Engler. I'm joined amongst my brethren, Archbishop Belmont from the house of Belmont, called Judah from the house of Murphy, Brother Murphy, Earl Esquire, Brother Burgess from the house of Burgess, Earl Esquire Simpson from the House of Simpson, and soon to be Earl Esquire, Brother Holder from the House of Holder. Thank you for your attendance here in Sunday school. We have a marvelous lesson for those who have been on this lesson from the King's Bench. It's very important that, as we say in all lessons, it's better for you to not know this than to know this and not follow it. I'll let everybody give their say a couple of words, get a minute to say hello to the viewers, as well as let them know who you are so we can get on with this marvelous lesson. I adjourn. Bishop.
Greetings, family. It is Archbishop Beaumont from the House of Beaumont. We're for the Third Temple English Church of England, as well as the Kingdom of England, also known as the Kingdom or Empire of Albion. Today, we have a beautiful lesson that was beautifully created by our King regarding us and tying ourselves right back to our resource that we direly need in this day and time to rebuild our kingdom. Many brothers and sisters, this is going to be something that's going to show you why you must come back home. Because after today, on this September 26, 2971 Berber calendar or 2021 Gregorian calendar, this is the last day that the Third Temple English Church of England will be on the Instagram or any other social media platform besides YouTube. If you want to see and come in, get the introduction, which is required only on the YouTube channel and our website, which is the Third Temple English Church.com. For those who are going to be watching this video for future references, those are going to be only ways for you to get this information, because none of our members are going to be seen outside the church after this day. This info is really for those who are ready to accept their responsibility and be accountable of what actually had to happen, and knowing what you have to do to go back so that way it doesn't happen again. So it's been tailorly fit for a chosen few. And as we go ahead and get through this lesson, hopefully you can see yourself coming through those doors to continue to go and do this great work that we all must do underneath this birthright, which has an obligation. So with that being said, I leave the rest of the introduction to the rest of the brothers. But next, go ahead and be our C.A. Murphy from the Noble House of Murphy.
Thank you, Archbishop. Welcome, people, here to the Third Temple English Church for another marvelous lesson. Right now, I just want everybody to understand that this is a beautiful time. I call this particular lesson, Show Me the Money. But the King has prepared something beautiful for you all so that you can download and apply to your own selves. Remember, this is an opportunity to honor your ancestors and return back to the foundation that was set before you. Some of my greatest are in the church, so here we are to service you, the people, with the truth, uninhibited and unadulterated, no additives or preservatives. I love you all at the sound of my voice, and I trust that you're going to get this marvelous lesson. Get your notes, and we'll get it done. Peace and love. Brother Murphy from the House of Murphy, I love you all, and we'll see you on the other side. Show me the money.
Brother Burgess from the Earl Esquire Earl from the House of Burgess. You go ahead, brother.
Greetings, angels. It's Brother Burgess from the House of Burgess. And I want y'all to pay attention today. All your answers will be, all your questions will be answered. Seek and you will find. I yield the floor.
Well said. Brother Holder, Earl Holder from the House of Holder, soon to be.
Welcome, welcome, welcome to the Third Temple English Church, the only place that brings you the truth. And this is your brother, soon to be Esquire, as you heard the King say. But this is your brother who cares about you, loves you, wants you to know the truth from the House of Holder. We are here to give you everything that you need so that you can find your way home to the light. So when you're ready to come home, we will be here. Thank you very much, and please enjoy what is about to come.
Once as always, Earl Esquire Simpson from the House of Simpson.
Greetings, 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 and welcome to the Third Temple English Church of England. I am your brother, Earl Simpson from the House of Simpson. I want to welcome everyone. I want to welcome the King's Bench, welcome the Archbishop, CA, and the King, most importantly. And I want to say thank you to everyone for joining us today for another marvelous lesson. We here from the King's Bench to just give you a plate to feast off of. Come join us at the table. Thank you.
Well said, well said, well said from all their respective houses. As we said, there's no teachings like these teachings here from the King's Bench under the Third Temple English Church of England. We definitely have Jews for you today. And I just want you, brothers and sisters, families, friends, uncle, nieces, all those at the sound of my voice to really home in on what we're trying to tell you today, because it's very important for your salvation. Just give me one more second just to type this in, and we can get in and on with this marvelous lesson. Excuse me for my spelling. Okay, here we go. All right. All right, yes, let's go. All right, once again, welcome everybody. This is your king, Clifford Jefferson, also termed as Godfrey, Jeffrey, any way you can say it, but as the prefix son, meaning come down from or descend down from, and this is due your surname. We have a very important lesson to you in lieu of full faith and credit that should be given to the English people. United States of America has been indebted to the English people from their very creation. This goes into our previous lesson dealing with charters. There have been no world charters given by the United States since their independence in 1783. All of a sudden now, charters are given by way of de facto legislation passed by Congress. We have two governments functioning here today. One under the Constitution, which is limited, or how should I say it? But it's limited power as directed by the Constitution, and then you have the national government of the Congress that has no limitation, because as they pass legislation, it becomes law. And some of that law is de facto, non de jure. And we, the citizens, i.e. the inhabitants, i.e. the residents, have an obligation to challenge it. Because we're the reason we're in this position we're in today, as a result of the ignorance of the people. When I say people, I mean the public. We're going to get into a very clear understanding so there can be no shadow of a doubt that everybody who are in the position as what we call United States citizens are in a very serious predicament. You have become the security for the United States concerning the debt they own to the creditor. And we are the creditors, the English people. And we're going to show you why. We have some articles to read from. It will be in your best interest to read it along with us. Unfortunately, we have to move quickly, but this is why we have Clifford in, so that you can get an in-depth study of what it is that we teach in the Third Temple English Church on the King's Bench. It's very informative, very concrete, and there can be no doubt about what it is that we have to bring to the people for their salvation. Without further ado, let's get started. You want to say something, CA?
Real brief, King. I was just making note of the synonymous between the creditor and the creator. I yield the floor.
Okay, we will establish that. Like I said, I'm going to need participation from the King's bench. And Archbishop, you can go first if he's there. If not, CA, you can go. You can start.
Okay.
Oh, Archbishop, you there? Okay, all right.
Yeah, I was just waiting. All right, so it says background 1933, the bankruptcy of the United States. 1933 was a year of major events in America. During this year, constitutional money, gold, became outlawed, and effectively all property in America became mortgaged and held in trust for the Federal Reserve Bank as collateral for the nation's debt. All of this was done without the full knowledge or consent of the American people. This was the year that the government instituted the creation of the all capital letter straw man, named via the newly required birth certificates for American citizens, thus creating a whole new class of persons as debtor slaves. On June 5th, 1933, the United States Congress passed House Joint Resolution 192, which served as a declaration of bankruptcy. Congress declared in House Joint Resolution 192 that demanding payments in gold, constitutional money, or any particular form would now be against public policy. At the same time, President Roosevelt issued Executive Order 6102, forbidding the hoarding of gold coins, gold bullion, and certificates. With this executive order, Roosevelt ordered that most of the gold in circulation be turned into the Federal Reserve banks across the nation under the threat of fines and 10 years imprisonment. What the leaders at the time failed to disclose was that with the confiscation of all gold, money, and property, that made all Americans, spelled in proper case, creditors to the United States bankruptcy. Because of the passage of House Joint Resolution 192, it was now illegal for Americans to pay for anything. Gold was traded for Federal Reserve notes of reserve notes of indebtedness, which made paying for anything impossible, as notes of debt do not pay for anything, but delay the payment until a later date. What the government offered instead of gold was credit, but they offered it to the banks, not the people.
Well said. So for all you viewers, what has been read by Archbishop was an act created in 1933 called the House Joint Resolution of 192 that put the people in a position that they could not pay their bills anymore. But the Executive Order 6102 that had the people turn in all their gold. Now, this is in 1933. This is the time of what we call the New Deal under Theodore Roosevelt. There was a lot of things going on at this time.
FDR.
Franklin Theodore Roosevelt. All right, so it's very important to understand what was done in 1933, but you cannot understand what happened in 1933 if you don't know what preceded it. Okay, so this dealing with the national debt. The national debt of the United States of America as a result of them, or they're calling their independence from Great Britain. This national debt going back to the 1790s is called the Funding Act. Once again, it is called the Funding Act. This Funding Act was a result of the 13 colonies, who were also called the 13 colonies in rebellion. They were also called the 13 colonies as independent nations. They were also called the 13 colonies, which became what they call the confederations, which are now called the Federal Union. Very, very important. Also, this also consists of what we call the Residency Act. The Residency Act was an act created for where the seat of the capital will be situated. This particular territory was borrowed from Maryland and Virginia. It was in regards to where the capital city would be sitting, and it was what they call Washington, D.C. This was called a municipality. A municipality is what they call a state-owned enterprise or a government-owned enterprise by way of a term they call corporatization. This is what happened to the citizens. They became known as United States persons. This happened as a result of the birth certificate. The birth certificate denotes to the citizenship or where you were born. If the state resides in the city, because most of the encounters that the citizens, inhabitants, residents have is not with the state. The state sits within the municipality. And the municipality is a state-owned enterprise by way of an act of legislation. Now, the state are the citizens, the inhabitants are the residents, because it says powers not delegated to the federal government are reserved for the states or the people. The people are the public. The public is what we call the population. Now, it's very important to understand at the time of the Compromise of 1790 that included the Residency Act and the Funding Act for the two groups who are now here in the territory they now call United States of America. First of all, a public. We must understand what the public is. So let's read it for ourselves. CA.
Unmute. All right. Unmute my phone. The public redirects here for use of the public description, In public relations and communication science, publics are groups of individuals, people, and public, aka general public. It is the total such grouping sphere. The concept of public also has been defined as political science, psychology, marketing, and advertising in public relations and communication science. It is one of the more ambiguous concepts in the field, although it has definitions in the theory in the theory of the field that has been formulated from the early 20th century onward, and suffered more recent years from being blurred as a result of conflation of the ideas of the public within the notion of audience, marketing segments, community, consistency, and stakeholders. Constituency and stakeholders.
Stop right there. Stop right there. Listen very closely, viewers. Please listen. It says in public relations and communication science. That means public relations, and the only way you can have public relations is by communicating with each other. Am I right, King's Bench?
Correct. Correct.
Okay. It says publics are a group of individual people. So that means that in society, we have different groups of individual people, different nationalities, but in America, you are grouped together. So you have different nationalities or groups of people who make up the public, i.e. the state, which is called a body of politics or polity. But remember, we have a separation of church and state. So now this is another group of different religious bodies of politics that are different, because you have all types of religious societies. People believe whenever they want, and they're still recognized here in North America. That's why the Constitution says there'll be no religious test. They can't authorize a particular religious society backed by the Constitution, because it will be a violation of one's religious practice for them to do that. Now, this was a trick we're going to show you. So it says the concept of the public also has been defined with political science, psychology, and marketing. This deals with corporatization or stakeholder, as it said. Stakeholder makes reference to corporations, i.e. legal persons, and it makes reference to marketing, which deals with consumers. And they assume that the public are consumers. When you go out there in society and you deal with the agencies that are within the public, it's like a big supermarket. Mm-hmm. And you're going to supermarkets that own what we call the territory. It just so happens not to be inside of a building. The markets are in the building that sit on the land that belongs to somebody. And it's ran by somebody which we call the state government, which is no other than the municipality, because the states sit within a municipality. Because under the Residency Act that came from the Compromise of 1790, it said that they were looking for a place to sit their capital of their nation state, which was the United States of America, which sits in capital city, which is called Washington, D.C. So let's reveal, first of all, let's just build something in the public. Etymology of the term public. Please read for him, CA.
The etymology and definition. The name public originates with the Latin publicus, form publius, to the English word populus, and the general denotes some mass population, the people, in association with the matter of common interest. So in political science or in history, a public is a population of individuals or associations with civic affairs or affairs of office or state.
Stop right there. Okay, so as we see, now the etymology of the word public deals with mass population of people. People, y'all, human beings. People have self-awareness. Now they will also have what they call legal persons. And this is what a legal person is defined, which a public person is not. Okay, let's go here. All right. Compromise, 1790. Read the first paragraph.
Compromise in 1790 was a compromise between Alexander Hamilton and Thomas Jefferson with James Madison, where Hamilton won the decision for the national government to take over and pay the state debts. And Jefferson and Madison obtained a national capital, District of Columbia of the South. The compromise resolved in a deadlock in Congress. Southerners were blocking the assumption of the state debt by the Treasury, hereby destroying the Hamilton program for building a fiscal strong federal government. Northerners rejected the proposal, much desired by Virginians, to locate the permanent national capital of Virginia and Maryland border. The meeting was organized by Thomas Jefferson, and only he, James Madison, and Alexander Hamilton were present at the meeting. This led to many assumptions about what was discussed at this meeting. The compromise made possible the passage of Residence and Funding Assumption Act, July and August 1790. According to the historian Jacob Koch, it is generally regarded as one of the most important bargaining in American history, ranking just below better known Missouri Compromise and a compromise of 1850. Point of interest.
That's fine. Go ahead. Make your inquiry.
So they're basically saying that this was the most important deal made in American history for the establishment of the federal government to take over the debt of all the private individual states. Therefore, letting all their power into one central government or one municipality located in DC.
Well said. Well said. Any other inquiries? Okay, let's move on. So we know the compromise of 1790 involved the Residency Act and the Funding Act. So let's get a little history on the Residency Act, as CA just said.
And one more point of interest, King. It was made note that there were only Thomas Jefferson and James Madison there. So there was only two people there bargaining for the salvation and the lives of millions in this colonies at the time. So obviously shady dealings going on, but the people had, the Southerners resisted it for their reasons and Northerners resisted for this reasons, what's going into. I yield.
Okay, and that's very important to understand because as colonists coming here previously, prior to this taking place, there were colonists who were given the right to set up plantations by way of a charter given by the assumed King James I. All right, they're not English people. These are foreigners now calling themselves the 13 colonies, British 13 colonies, I might add, because King James was the King of England, Ireland, and Scotland. Great Britain didn't come until 1707. Okay, so under the charter, which we're talking about Virginia, because the capital city called United States District of Columbia was took up from Maryland and Virginia. Prior to that, Virginia and all the other 13 colonies from South Carolina all the way up to Maine was included in the territorial charter of 1606, as well as the charter that preceded the charter of 1763 that included the western part that was inhabited by or overseen by Spain and France. That was also succeeded to Great Britain under the authority of King George. All right, so now we have to understand that prior to 1790, all of this was still under the jurisdiction of Parliament. Under Parliament, 1790, because the Residency Act wasn't for the ones who was already here. This was the English. We're going to show you the stats of the population of the people. Because we said public is individual groups. And we know separation of state is conditioned now. So there's still individual groups in the state and individual groups in the religious society. But all those groups in religious society are not the right religious society pertaining to this land, because they got their authority from the English religious society, i.e. the Church of England. Okay, let's move forward. Residency Act. Brother Burgess.
The Residency Act of 1790, officially titled an act for establishing the temporary and permanent seat of the government of the United States, is the United States federal statute adopted during the second session of the first United States Congress and signed into law by President George Washington on July 16, 1790. The act provides for the national capital and permanent seat of government to be established at a site along the Potomac River and empowered Potomac River and empowered the President Washington to appoint commissioners to oversee the project. It also set a deadline on December 1800 for the capital to be ready, and designated Philadelphia as the nation's temporary capital while the new seat of the government was being built. At the time of the federal government was operating out of New York City. Congress passed the Residency Act as part of the compromise of 1790, broken in amongst James Madison, Thomas Jefferson, and Alexander Hamilton. Madison and Jefferson favored a southerly site for the capital on the Potomac River, Potomac River, but they lacked the majority to pass the measures through Congress. Meanwhile, Hamilton was pushing for the Congress to pass the Exemption Bill, to allow the federal government to assume debt accumulated by the states during the American Revolutionary War with the compromise, with the compromise, Hamilton was able to muster support from the New York State congressional delegation I keep getting that word wrong. Delegation. Delegates for the Panama
I'm sorry.
sites.
Where you delegation?
No, delegation.
Delegation, yeah.
While 4 delegates, all the districts bordering the Paramount switched from opposite to support the exemption bill.
Okay, well said. So the Residency Act was part of the compromise in 1790, and in lieu of where the capital city will sit as a seat of government. And as you can see, Alexander Hamilton, Thomas Jefferson, and James Madison were all part of this new act. And this was also a part of what they call the Assumption Act, called the Funding Act. So let's see what that is. Go ahead, Brother Burgess.
If I'm not mistaken, we still dealing with the House of Commons, right? With them doing this privately amongst themselves.
Say it again.
This is the House of Commons doing this privately amongst themselves.
Well, now where the House of Commons does not exist, they're now the General Assembly now.
Okay, I follow.
All right. Go ahead. Go ahead. Read the Funding Act.
The Funding Act of 1790, the full title of which, an act making provisions for the payment of the debt of the United States, was passed on August the 4th, 1790 by the United States Congress as a part of the compromise of 1790. As a part of the compromise of 1790 to address the issue of funding, debt service, repayment, and retirement of the domestic debt incurred by the state government, first as 13 colonies, then as state in rebellion, independence, and confederation, and finally as a member as a single federal union. By the act of the newly inaugurated federal government under the United States Constitution assumed and thereby retired the debt of each of the individual colonies in rebellion and the bonded debt of the states and confederation, which each state had individually and independently issued on its own full faith and credit, which each of them was in effect as independent nations. Through the new Department of the Treasury, the U.S. government issued U.S. Treasury security backed by the full faith and credit of the United States and offered them to be the bondholder of the formal states and confederations bonded debts at per that is at 100% of the state bonds face value full assumption and at the rate of interest and all other terms that was as specified on the bonds when they was issued by the states and confederations.
Mm-hmm.
When that was done, full assumptions of the state debt by the federal government had thereby occurred through the issues of federal securities, and for the states of the new union, the full and complete retirement of their bonded obligations secured in the Revelation and the Confederation.
Revolution is the Confederation. Well said. All right. So as you see, concerning the compromise of 1790, there were 2 deals: the Funding Act and the Residency Act. And as it's stated with the Funding Act, there was the domestic debt that the United States of America owed to the so-called people, i.e. the public. All right. Now, public, as we said, is individual groups. And individual groups is ambiguous because we need to know who are they talking about out of those groups, as well as at that time, the individual groups were dealing with religious society at that time, made up of the community. So these need to be these things need to be considered. CA.
Excellent point. Point of interest. So here you had individual states who there is a national debt, and each state has its own independent sovereignty at this particular time. But what they're doing is they're now channeling everything up to an apex, which is the federal government. They want now the states to answer to the federal government. So for different reasons, states, remember that all the gold and silver had been taken away. So states were issuing their own money. Mm-hmm. And because states were issuing their own money, they were able to offer full faith and credit to their people in their particular territories or parishes. So the Funding and the Residency Act now made it to where the states had to answer to the federal in Washington, D.C., and took away its sovereignty as an independent state to settle its debts, make bills and currencies, etc. So the importance is now that your birth certificate being an instrument of a municipality, you were not able to have access to that full faith and credit through your state, as it were, in this particular time where the states were issuing money backed by your gold and silver, which was supposed to be in their trust. They then turned it over to the federal government, which now has the authority to administer your particular estate. Because again, these states had their own money. You see, this is a North Carolina, South Carolina banknote. It is not in circulation as of today. I yield the floor.
Well said, Archbishop, because this came through what they call the Security Act of 1933. But I want to, before I go there, as it stated, the Funding Act was based off the funding the national government as they were known as the 13 colonies, states, rebellions, independence in the Confederation, and finally as a single federal union. It's very important because remember, without the people, you wouldn't have no 13 colonies. Without the people, you wouldn't have no rebellion nation. Without the people, you have no nations and independence. Without the people, you have no confederation. Without the people, you have no federal union. And the people is the public. The public is the mass population of individual groups. But they're speaking about a specific individual group of people. They're speaking about U.S. Americans, United States, i.e. Americans. They're not talking about anybody else. So as CA just said, you have become the security in lieu of the debt, because this is why they created debits and credits. Mm-hmm. For United States to exist, they had to get credit. And they had to get it from who? A creditor. And the creditor didn't give out promissory notes because there are three types of instruments that deals with credit. Archbishop showed you the security instruments, but there are also two types of credit instruments. Credit means extended debt. That's all that means. Extended debt. So if you get credit, brothers and sisters, you got more debt. You just paying it back at a later date. It's called a maturity date. And if you got debt, that means that you just paying it off with promissory notes, because the only three instruments the main instruments dealing with credit instruments is a promissory note, which is called a greenback, Federal Reserve note, or a bill of lading, or a check. Those are three instruments that deals with credit. And credit means debt on assignment.
Debt on assignment, yep.
Debt on assignment. You still owe. That's why you have debits and credits. In financial law, it's called assets equals liabilities plus equity. I'm going to say it again. Assets equals liabilities plus equity. It's called debits and credits. You only see one side of the ledger. There's two sides. It's called double bookkeeping entry. So this is what happens at the close of the fiscal year. Once the liabilities are paid off, whatever left over goes to the shareholder. So now the shareholders were the founding fathers who had security bonds on the citizens by making them the debtors based off the credit that he got from the creditor. Let's move forward. Now, they owe a domestic debt to the public. Let's see what the domestic debt is. Brother Simpson.
Internal debt. In public finance, internal debt or domestic debt is the component of the total government debt in a country that is owed to the lenders within the country. The internal government debt is complement in external government debt. The main sources of funds for internal debts are commercial banks and other financial institutions. Internal public debt owed by a government, money a government borrows from its citizens, is part of the country's national debt. It is a form of fiat creation of money in which the government obtains finance not by creating it de novo, but by borrowing it. The money created is in form of treasury securities or securities borrowed from the central bank. These may be traded, but will only rarely be spent on goods and services. In this way, the expected increase in inflation due to the increase in national wealth is lower than if the governments had simply created the money de novo and increased the more liquid forms of wealth, i.e. money supply.
Okay, so it says an internal debt, i.e. domestic debt, that occurred from the Funding Act when they borrowed from our ancestors, i.e. the Bank of England. They created a debt that they owed to the English citizens. Because remember, you have English citizens, the public citizens are individual groups, right, in the community or the public, i.e. the population. And we know that in those individual groups, being that church and state is separated, you had individual religious societies made of people, i.e. the public. Okay, now it says we're talking about a debt that America, i.e. United States of America, and when I say United States of America, I'm talking about the people, the citizens, the residents, the inhabitants. That's what I'm talking about. You are the funding or the creditors for the debt that they accumulate. All right, so it says in public finance, the internal debt or domestic debt is a debt owed to the people, i.e. the citizens. And then there's a form of security based off what they got their loan for, which was called fiat money from the first Federal Reserve Bank. The first Federal Reserve Bank here in North America was created in 1791, a year later after the Funding Act and the Residency Act. Okay, they set up shop in the capital of Washington, D.C. Then they got their funding to fund their setup in Washington, D.C. Thomas Jefferson told them that was a violation of Article 1, Section 10, because in order to pay your debt, there must be gold and silver. How we know that? Let's go here. Okay, read that, Brother Simpson.
Coinage Act of 1792. The Coinage Act of 1792, also known as the Mint Act, officially an act establishing a mint and regulating the coins of the United States, passed by the United States Congress on April 2nd, 1792, created the United States dollar as the country's standard unit of money, established the United States Mint, and regulated the coinage of the United States. This act established the silver dollar as the unit of money in the United States, declared it to be lawful tender, and created a decimal system for the U.S. currency. By the act, the mint was to be situated at the seat of government of the United States. The 5 original officers of the U.S. Mint were a director, an assayer, a chief coiner, an engraver, and a treasurer, not the same as the Secretary of Treasury. The act allowed that one person could perform the functions of chief coiner and engraver. The assayer, chief coiner, and treasurer were required to post a $10,000 bond with the Secretary of the Treasury. The act pegged the newly created United States dollar to the value of widely used Spanish silver dollar, saying it was to have the value of a Spanish mill dollar as the same is now current.
Now who signed this into law?
Signed into law by President George Washington on April 2nd, 1792.
Okay, so as we said, that the Department of Treasury, under the funding by the Bank of England for the citizens who were part of this trust, because it's called the public trust. They are trustees of the public trust, and there was domestic debt that they owed to the public based off the trust that were left for the public and their heirs and successors. All right, but as we can see, this was not dealt with. Go ahead, CA.
I just wanted to show you what they were printing in this time. This is a dollar. This is the silver minted dollar from, it's dated 1883. And this is what the United States of America, $1 looked like. Now, this has a Romanized symbol on here. You know, that anytime you see Romanesque symbols on your minting and your coin, you know who's doing the minting. Romans. This is another one. It's a $50, and this is your favorite Benjamin Franklin. So, and this is dated for 1963, so it's a later date. But here, they've taken out the gold, and they still were minting memorial or commemorative coinage. But this this being in circulation meant that your estates were being transferred or annexed or sent over to what was first the states, and then secondly, what was the federal bank. So all of your minting coins and what you were supposed to use for payments for goods and services, now you were only able to use the fiat currency opposed to the minted coins. I yield the floor.
Well said. Archbishop, want to make an inquiry?
Man, and as we see, all of this can be traced back to John Law's his scheme to usurp the people from utilizing metal as a form of currency and start putting their so-called faith into paper, which the people themselves did not actually say they wanted to do. So we're already going back to the Constitution, which forbade the payment of debt to be anything else besides gold and silver. Now you start utilizing this paper, you're now in a violation of the very Constitution that you said that you are supposed to be preserving your rights. And we know back then nobody utilized paper besides the usurpers.
Well said, well said. Okay, so we understand that through the Funding Act, the Funding Act was to fund the national government with fiat money, not de novo, but in novo, means that they borrowed from somebody, all right, in order to establish the first bank in America called the Bank of America, all right? And this is where we get to the Federal Reserve Bank. We're going to skip through here and just go down to the years. As we can see, can everybody see that?
Yes.
All right.
Yeah.
History of the Central Bank of the United States. It says, Bank of North America. The bank is de facto under the Confederation Congress from 1782 to 1791. Then from 1791 to 1811, it was called the First Bank of the United States. Then on through there, it went through different changes in names till it was finally designated as the Federal Reserve Bank in 1913. All right, 1913. You got a whole bunch of Federal Reserve banks running around here. All right, as a result of them issuing out Federal Reserve notes, which backs the financial institutions that issue out what they call credit, which is what? Federal Reserve notes. So they're actually issuing out debt instead of credit.
Mm-hmm.
Just debt you can pay back later. And this is known as the debt clock or the national debt clock. All right. And this is a result of the security that they got held on the United States citizens, i.e. U.S. persons. Now, let's be specific about this because as we stated, that it must be, hold on. What's that at? All right. As we stated, that it must be backed. This is called currency. Currency is what we call store trade, store value, medium of exchange, unit account, or what they call deferred payment. All this is a result of those promissory notes, i.e. those instruments are being traded on the stock market. How do we know that? Let's see. Read the first paragraph. Brother Holder.
Currency. A currency, in the most specific sense, is money in any form when in use or circulation as a medium of exchange, especially circulating banknotes and coins. A more general definition is that a currency is a system of money, monetary units in common use, especially for people in a nation. Under this definition, US dollars, euros, Indian rupee, Japanese yen, and pound sterling are examples of currencies. Currencies may act as store of value and be traded between nations in foreign exchange markets, which determine the relative values of the different currencies. Currencies in this sense are defined by governments, and each type has limited boundaries of acceptance.
Read the next one.
Other definitions of the term currency appear in the respective synonymous article, banknotes, coin, and money. This article uses the definition which focuses on the currency systems of countries.
Stop right there. That's fine. Okay, so we're talking about banknotes and coins. So people are assumed that the United States has coin legal tender, i.e. Federal Reserve notes, as money. They are legal for paying debts. But as we know, it's not a tradable because it's not a commodity and it has no intrinsic value. Mm-hmm. Once again, it's not a commodity because it has no intrinsic value. How we know that? Let's look at it. Read the first paragraph. Brother Holder.
Greenbacks were paper currency, fiat money issued by the United States during the American Civil War that were printed in the green on the back. There were two forms: demand notes issued in 1861, 1862, and United States notes issued in 1862 to 1865. They were legal tender, pay attention to that word, by law, but were not backed by gold or silver, only the credibility of the US government.
So did you hear that? Only the credibility of the United States government, but the United States government has no credibility. Why? Because they got credit from the creditor.
They are debtors. That's why they keep going bankrupt or lifting.
They keep going bankrupt, y'all, because they don't have any money.
Perpetual debtors.
Now, George Washington even told you that he lied because he signed the Coin Act in 1792 for first meant to be commodity or backed by gold and silver, which has intrinsic value. So they had to create you as the surety through the Security Act of 1933. Because you had the House Joint Resolution of 1933 with the Executive Act of 6102, which suspended all the gold. And if you had gold, you had to turn it in. Why? Because you're going to be put up as the front, security interest. How we know that? Look at the Security Act of 1933. Now we see a trail here, brothers and sisters. First of all, let's read this right quick before we go there. Read this. Brother Holder.
Debits and credits. In double entry bookkeeping, debits and credits are entries made in account ledgers to record changes in value resulting from business transactions. A debt entry in an account represents a transfer of value to that account, and a credit entry represents a transfer from the account. Each transaction transfers value from credited accounts to debited accounts. For example, a tenant who writes a rent check to a landlord would enter a credit for the bank account on which the check is drawn, and a debit in a recent expense account. Similarly,
yeah,
the landlord would enter a credit in the rent income account associated with the tenant and the debit for the bank account where the check is deposited.
Scott, right there. So what happens is that the bank is only used for a medium of exchange through what we call unit account as a deferred payment, because they don't issue out credit. They issue out debt. They issue out debt. They don't give you any money. This is why you have a debit account and a checking account. It's why you have a debit card and a check and what they call a credit card. You have a debit card and a check card. Check card is to defer the payment of the debt. A debit card is to take the money right away. A debit account is where you can get the money right away. A checking account is a form of deferred payment, where it's all what we call promissory notes, a form of credit. Just one is deferring the payment. Why? Because they keep a ledger of all debits and credits, and the financial statements, which we call GAAP, General Accepted Accountable Principles. They have to be accountable for everything they took in and everything that goes out. That's called debited accounting. It's called T. If you make a T, debits goes on one side and credits go on the other. It has to be balanced. This is why it says assets equals liability, because somebody's got to be liable for it.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody's got to be liable for the national debt. And they made you liable by way of you being a security interest to the debt that they got from a creditor, which the credit they gave to you.
Mm-hmm.
I hope that makes sense to y'all, because if it don't, you're lost. All right, let's see what we're talking about. A Security Act. Read that for him, Archbishop.
It says, Security Acts of 1933. The Securities Acts of 1933, also known as the 1933 Act, the Securities Act, the Truth and Securities Act, the Federal Securities Act, and the 33 Act was enacted by the United States Congress on May 27, 1933, during the Great Depression, and after the stock market crash of 1929. It is an integral part of the United States securities regulation. It is legislated pursuant to the Interstate Commerce Clause of the Constitution. It requires every offer or sale of securities that uses the means and instrumentalities of interstate commerce to be registered with the SEC pursuant to the 1933 Act, unless an exemption from registration exists under the law. The term means and instrumentalities of interstate commerce is extremely broad and of it virtually impossible to avoid the operation of the statute by attempting to offer or sell a security without using the instrumentality or interstate commerce. Any use of a telephone, for example, or the males would probably be enough to subject the transaction to the statute.
Okay, so anytime you're communicating with agencies in regards to what we call communication science or public relations, you're not dealing with people. You're dealing with corporations.
Corporations.
Because the people do their birth certificate. It's a form of security instrument to show you that you are a U.S. citizen, to be registered with the Security Exchange Commission, because we know that you're using that debt instrument. You're using the promissory note. You're using bill of lading. You're using checks. That's what you use to pay your bills with. But you're not paying in the bills because these are only promissory notes that just add to the national debt. Why? We're about to show you. Let's see at the function of the Security Act of 1933. Read purpose.
Says the primary purpose of the 33 Act is to ensure that buyers of securities receive complete and accurate information before they invest in securities. Unlike state blue sky laws, which impose merit reviews, the 33 Act embraces a disclosure philosophy, meaning that in theory, it is not illegal to sell a bad investment as long as all of the facts are accurately disclosed. A company that is required to register under the 33 Act must create a registration statement, which includes a prospectus with copious information about the security, the company, the business, including audited financial statements. The company, the underwriter, and other individuals signing the registration statement are strictly liable for any inaccurate statements in the document. This extremely high level of liability exposure drives an enormous effort known as due diligence to ensure that the document is complete and accurate. The law bolsters and helps to maintain investor confidence, which in turn supports the stock market.
Registration.
Unless they qualify for an exemption, securities offered or sold to a United States person must be registered by filing registration statement with the SEC. Although the law is written to require registration of securities, it is more useful as a practical matter to consider the requirement to be that of registering offers and sales. If a person registers the sale of securities to person B, and then person B seeks to resell those securities, person B must still either file a registration statement or find an available exemption.
Stop. Now we're talking about securities offers or sold to a United States person. So we want to make sure who we're talking about, because we know a security backs our interest in lieu of credit being extended from a creditor to a borrower, i.e. a debtor. And we know that a creditor is the one who extends property, services, or monetary. And they expect that equal value should be rendered back to them. Failure to do so, they can put a lien on your property, put a foreclosure sign on your building, or take you to court to get finances. And 9 times out of 10, they will win. Why? Because they have a security interest. Some have a secure interest, and some have unsecured. When you have a secure interest, that means your assets is put up. So you fail to pay that debt as a borrower to the creditor, he able to lien or put a lien on your property to cover the assets. Remember, he had the liability as well.
Mm-hmm.
He had the liability because he ain't got no credit, because the only thing he lent you was debt. So therefore, he's the debtor to the one who credited him, and that's the bank. Who's a debtor? To who? The Federal Reserve government, i.e. the Federal Reserve Bank, because they credited to the ones who gave him the credit, which was the king and his heirs and successors. All right? So now let's look at the United States person, because it's specific. You talk about United States persons.
Mm-hmm.
Now, United States person says the term United States person or U.S. person is used in various contexts in United States laws and regulations within different meanings. So it's very important to, when you're using the word person in the United States, you better look at it with a fine tooth pick or magnifying glass, because 9 times out of 10, you're not making reference to a human being. How we know that? Just look at what they say, the definitions in regards to Security Act of 1933. Data collection and intelligence. The term U.S. person is used in the context of data collection and intelligence by the United States, particularly with respect to provisions of Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act. If information from, about, or to a U.S. person who is not named terrorist is captured in the course of a U.S. foreign intelligence activities, there is a strict rule about preserving the anonymity of such person and the subsequent intelligence report. Only if the U.S. person information is relevant to the report, it is included. According to the National Security Agency website, the federal law and executive orders define the United States person as any of the following. A, as citizen or national of the United States. So every person who's a United States citizen, this is what they're talking about. You are a security interest to them. B, an alien lawfully admitted to permanent residence, that's a taxpayer, an unincorporated association with a substantial number of members who are citizens of the U.S. who are aliens lawfully admitted to permanent residency. That's a United States citizen. And D, A, B, C, D, a corporation that is incorporated and a United States citizen. That's called a state-owned agency or a government-owned agency by way of corporatization. That's by way of making you a corporation. We're going to show you in a second. As well as defined by Security Act, securities market regulation, because remember, a public is not a stakeholder or a market. We know stakeholders of corporations and market deal with consumers. And Security Act deals with Security Exchange Commission deals with marketing and trade for consumers. All right. Security Markets Regulation S promulgates under Section Act of 1930, Security Act of 1933, and Section 902, Section K:1 defines U.S. person as the same as above, a natural person resident in the United States, any partnership or corporation organized or incorporated under the laws of the United States, any estate of which any executor or administrator is a U.S. person. Now they talk about, because we know under Title 54, I think it's A or Title 54, it says that a resident is a taxpayer. Let me get it right. A taxpayer is a resident. A resident taxpayer is an individual, trust, or estate. So if you're a resident, you're a taxpayer. And if you're a resident taxpayer, then that means they're taxing your estate or trust under revised statute Title 54. All right, so this is how they're doing it, by making you a security interest as a bond that they have on you as bond holders. That makes sense, King Bench?
Makes a lot of sense.
Okay, let's go. 3, any estate in which the executor or administrator is a U.S. person. 4, any trust of which a trustee is a U.S. person. 5, any agency or branch or foreign entity located in the United States. 6, any non-discretionary account or similar account. Now you're talking about accounts, y'all. Now you're talking about accounts. Because remember, currency is trade, store value, unit of account, medium of exchange, or deferred payment, method of payment. This is what they're doing. They're making payments just based off extending credit, using those debt instruments that were created by the government so that it could secure the debt that they owe to the creditor that they borrowed from, i.e. the English people. This is why the national debt keeps going up. 7, a discretionary account or similar account other than a state or trust held by the dealer or the fiduciary organized, incorporated, or if an individual resident in the United States. And 8, any partnership or corporation, if 1, organized or incorporated under the laws of foreign jurisdiction, and 2, formed by a U.S. person principally for the purpose of investing in securities not registered under the Act unless it is organized or incorporated and owned by an accredited investor as defined in Rule 501A, who are not natural person, estates, or trusts. Now we got to look at that. How we look at that? Let's look at the national debt. Let's look at this. Because we know that the national debt goes back to the Funding Act and the Registry Act during the compromise of 1790 with the United States government when as they were known as the 13 colonies, fleeting nations, or what they said it was rebellion, independence, as the Confederation, and now as the Federal Union. All right, they still had a national debt or a debt that they owe as domestic debt to the citizens. They're not the citizens because the United States citizen is the United States who own the debt. So who they owe the debt to? The Englishmen who were the creditors who established what they call the Bank of England. Okay, so let's look at this national debt. The national debt is a billboard-sized running total display that shows the United States gross national debt and each American family share of that debt. Did y'all hear that?
Mm-hmm.
It shows you right there. The national debt clock is a clock that shows on a billboard and the United States, in lieu of the United States gross national debt, including each American family share of the debt. Next paragraph. No, not the next paragraph, right below it. West of 6th Avenue between 42nd and 43rd Street in Manhattan, New York City. It was the first debt clock installed anywhere. See, you want to say something?
I'm putting further emphasis on the fact that what you're saying is that each American family is entitled to pay citizens and national.
Citizens and national. How we know that? It's called intergenerational equity, or what we call sweat equity. I don't think they ever heard of that, did they?
Mm-mm. No, I don't think they ever heard of it.
Ever heard about that? Let me see this here.
Nah, I never heard about that. Talk to me.
Okay,
please.
let's look at that. It's also called sweat equity. Let's read sweat equity first. Archbishop.
Sweat equity. Sweat equity is a non-monetary benefit that a company's stakeholders give in labor and time, rather than a monetary contribution that benefit the company. Sweat equity is rewarded in the form of sweat equity shares. These are the shares given out by a company in exchange for labor and time rather than a monetary amount.
Okay, we just defined public. And public is populace of mass of people who are not markets or stakeholders. Now they talk about stakeholders under sweat equity. Didn't it just say that?
Mm-hmm.
It says it's a non-monetary benefit that a company, i.e. stakeholder. So most United States citizens are stakeholders. Why? Because you've been corporatized. How you've been corporatized? Let's show them how they've been corporatized through what they call intergenerational debt or equity. Same thing as sweat equity. Read the first paragraph, Archbishop.
Intergenerational equity. Intergenerational equity in economic, psychological, and sociological contexts is the concept of idea of fairness or justice between generations. The concept can be applied to fairness and dynamics between children, youth, adults, and seniors. In terms of treatment and interactions, it can also be applied to fairness between generations currently living and future generations.
Stop right there. Let's go right here. Hold on. Where is it at? I'm looking for. Continue to read. Go ahead.
All right. Says conversationists and intergenerational equity occur across several fields. It is often discussed in public economics, especially with regard to transition economics, social policy, and governmental budget making. Many cite the growing U.S. national debt as an example of an intergenerational inequity, as future generations will shoulder the consequences.
You hear that? Read that again. It didn't say equity, it said inequity.
Yep, it says many cite the growing U.S. national debt as an example of intergenerational inequity, as future generations will shoulder the consequences.
Okay, so that's saying that you're responsible under what we call the debt clock to actually be responsible for the debt. And how we know that is go back to that national debt clock.
Point of interest, this is the reason why they said you're born into debt.
Mm-hmm.
You're born into the debt of your family.
Mm-hmm.
It's your obligation to get them out, or you to get them out via the bloodline.
Via the bloodline. It's called corruption of the blood by bill of attainder. Bill of attainder is ex post facto law that's created to keep you from inheriting what was left from you by your heirs and ancestors. Bill of attainder or ex post facto law. That's under the Constitution. All right. So we talk about the national debt that was created by the Funding Act and the Registry Act, which was part of the Compromise of 1790, in lieu of the United States of America and their citizens being obligated to fund their national debt as well as pay back the national debt to the creditor who are English citizens. Let's look at the debt clock.
Point of
Read
interest.
that. Go ahead, brother.
And make note that it's because you, the people, are the original creditor, is why they seek to take you out of your de jure status, why they want to corporatize you, why they want to subjugate you, so that you can never return back to your ancestral inheritance.
Exactly. Point of interest as well. You want to talk about breaking generational curses? This is the curse.
Well said. Absolutely.
The curse. All right. So the national debt clock is also called the debt clock. Read what it says.
It says, a debt clock is a public counter which displays the government debt, also known as public debt or national debt of a public corporation.
Hold on. And stop. Public corporation? What are you talking about? Public corporation.
Stop the bus.
Public corporation. So the fact that you got corporation in the same sentence as government.
Let's go back. Let's go back. They talk, remember, it said the national debt is for not just the government, but it's American citizens. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And the debt clock is also a name or a term for the debt clock. And it said the debt clock or national clock or doomsday clock is a public counter, right? Remember, the national debt can only go up so much. It has a time that has expired, which is in 2014, it expired. We in 2021. It expired in 2014, y'all. We're going to show the viewers in a second. A debt clock is a public counter which displays the government debt, also known as the public or national debt. And as you read, under the national debt, the American citizens are part of it. Didn't it say that? Yep. American families share of that debt. So you're part of the debt. You funded it. You are the creditors to the federal government. You gave up everything you had. Why? Because everything you had was given to us given to you by us.
Yep.
The creditors. It was left in the trust. If it was left in the trust, that makes you a trustee. That makes you a trustee. So back to the debt clock. It said the debt clock or the national debt clock or the government debt is for public corporation. What's a public corporation? Read that for him, CA.
State-owned enterprise, SOE, or government-owned enterprise, GOE, is a business enterprise where the government or the state has a significant control through full, major, or significant minority ownership. Defining characteristics of an SOE are a distinct legal form, an operation in commercial affairs and activities. While they may also have a public policy objectives, e.g. a state railway company may aim to make transportation more accessible, SOE should be differentiated from government agencies or state entities established to pursue purely non-financial objectives. So, i.e., they're saying Department of DMV, IRS, all of these are private corporations representing government body policies, although having no authoritative or general authority.
Well said. This is the result of corporatization. Let's read what that says. Read that for him, CA.
Corporatization, article about transforming publicly owned or governmental organizations into business corporations for the economic and social ideology with a similar name, corporation. Corporation is a process of transforming and restructuring state assets, government agencies, public organizations, and municipal organizations into corporations.
Stop. Corporatization is the process of transforming and restructuring state assets, government agencies, public organizations, or municipal organizations into corporations. Now, just look at the Township Act of 1789, because we know the capital city of Washington, D.C. was in the city of Trenton. In the city of Washington, D.C. All right, it's called the District of Columbia. Now, let's look at the Township Act of 1798. And just to show you what's been done to y'all.
Your stuff.
Just to show the people what's been done to them.
And the only way for you to get yourself out is by knowing, acknowledging, and putting in the work.
There you go. Read that for them, CA.
Township Act 1789. The Township Act of 1789, an act incorporating the inhabitants of townships, designating their power and regulating their meetings. PL 1798, page 289, is an act passed by New Jersey legislator on February 21, 1798, that formally incorporated 104 municipalities in 13 counties in New Jersey. It set a standard on format for government of townships, an act largely replaced by the subsequent law.
Okay,
so
you
therefore
could
no
go ahead, CA.
So you therefore have no rights in your town meetings to govern yourselves and create policies that affected your community. It was now taken over by government structures. So now the government tells you what to do instead of you coming in unity and making decisions on how to govern yourselves.
Exactly. And that's why their motto is divide and conquer. As long as you got everybody out here believing in their own perspective of who God is, they can't come underneath the same house and worship. So that way, like I said, a house divided cannot stand. As long as they got that abstract mindset of who God is, they cannot come into the house of God as family or as a community to rebuild.
Mm-hmm. Remember, it's your common unity that allows you to go forward and live in your salvation. So if you can't agree, remember we talked about isms and schisms, believe in something so powerfully that you can't move forward. So, if they jump in and now are the authoritative figure in your community,
I'll do that when I'm finished.
They'll dictate to you how it is to govern yourselves, and then therefore incorporate yourselves, turning into sureties for their debt instead of being yourself the creditor, which your ancestors left you, Aaron's successor.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That brings us to back to the clock. Let me get there. What was that? Could you make me some coffee? 1 second, brothers. My baby made it back.
Yeah. Know the feeling.
Princess.
That's Gold Reserve Act. United States Gold Reserve Act of January 30, 1934 requires that all gold and gold certificates held in the Federal Reserve be surrendered, invested in the sole title of the United States Department of Treasury. It also prohibits the Treasury and financial institutions from redeeming dollar bills for gold. It established the Exchange Stabilization Fund under the control of the Treasury control of dollar value without the assistance or approval of the Federal Reserve, and authorized the president to establish gold value of the dollar proclamation. Now this brings me to here. Okay. Tell me that. Funny. Okay, debt clock. Now we're talking about the national debt clock or debt clock, right? Same thing. And it said the debt clock on the national, debt clock is a reference to what the citizens, American citizens, owe in lieu of them being the creditors for the new debt nation called the United States of America. All right. So just as I said, the national debt clock or debt clock track the debt that America owes, as well as the families that are subject by way of corporatization to fund the national debt. Let's go down and find out the origin. All right, where's it at? All right, boo-boo. Let me find it. Give me 1 second. Debt clock. Let me just find it. Okay. Read this context right here. Let's talk about the debt clock now, the national debt clock.
Context. There said in 2006 that the clock was a nonpartisan effort to think about intergenerational equity. We're a family business. We think generationally, and we don't want to see the next generation crippled by this burden.
Okay. Now, it says that we're a family. So America is a family in lieu of the national debt. So don't think the government is in it by itself. You as American is subject too, based off the context of the doomsday clock in regards to intergenerational equity. We already read that what that means. I'm not going to go back there. All right. Now let's go back to debt clock. Hold on, intergenerational. No, I want to go back there. Let's see where this term intergenerational equity or sweat equity came from. Where the origin did this come from? Now we see here, read similar projects.
The idea of conveying a message through a periodically updated clock found an earlier expression in the doomsday clock. However, the innovation of the national debt clock was to feature a constantly running counter. It has since inspired similar projects elsewhere, both in the United States and further afield. In particular, it has become a national fixture shows that the US increasing debt. By 1995, the New York Times reported that politicians were citing the clock to advocate for a reduction to the national budget. Various tracking counters of national debt are also kept online.
That's fine. So you have a national debt clock, a debt clock, and a doomsday clock, all saying the same thing about the national debt that the United States have, as well as the citizens who are citizens of the United States are subject to. All right, let's go back to this national clock. Oh, we're right there. I'm sorry. Where is it at? I'm missing something. Give me a second. All right, we're just going to move on. Okay. All right, so we see the national debt clock or the doomsday clock or the debt clock to make reference to the American family. This is very important. Why this is very important? Because it's a debt that America owed to the English citizens, because we know there's a difference between American and the English. And let's prove this right now before we go any further. Before we get into the who is owed, who owes the debt and who don't owe the debt. So if you don't owe the debt, that means you're the one that the debt is owed to, i.e. the credit. All right, let's go here. First of all, let's go right back here. Security Act of 1793. Where's it at? Okay. It says, "Is a citizen or a national of the United States under the Security Registry, under the Security Act of 1933, in order for you to register, you must be a United States person." Didn't it say that?
Mm-hmm.
Now, under the definition of U.S. person, and pertaining to the data or intelligence that they're used under this SEC for registration, it says a citizen or unincorporated association, etc. But what is a United States person? Let's look at that. American. It didn't say English American. It said American. So we know that you have two different nationalities, English and American. And we know that Americans started with the 13 colonies in what they call rebellion, the colonies independence, the colonies after Confederation, and then what we call the Federal Union. But you're talking about Americans who are of British descent, who were allowed under the Charter of 1606 by presumed King James, who were of Scottish descent. We're going to prove it. That's going to be the final cake on the puzzle. All right, read the definition for Americans, just the first paragraph.
It says, Americans are the citizens and nationals of the United States of America. Although citizens and nationals make up the majority of Americans, many dual citizens, expatriates, and permanent residents could also legally claim American nationality. The United States is home to people of many ethnic origins. As a result, American culture and law does not equate nationality with race or ethnicity, but with a bona fide citizenship and an oath of permanent allegiance.
Did y'all hear that?
Point of interest.
Go ahead, brother.
As well.
You know, I got to, how many of you call yourselves Americans? Such and such American.
Moorish
such
American.
And such American. You owe a debt. No, I'm not even going to go into it. You owe a debt. You're an American, whatever American, you owe a debt. Now, the creditor's here to collect.
Exactly.
I yield the floor.
And we come on.
Go ahead, Brother Simpson.
That point of interest was, I was going the same route as CA. You know, we talk about Moorish Americans, all these different Americans.
Chinese American, Irish American.
Yep.
I didn't single no one out. I said American. You call yourself American.
Indian,
you call yourself an American.
Any American. Period.
Mm-hmm. You heard what it says. It does not equate to race, nationality, or ethnicity.
Exactly.
You have a problem. You have a serious problem. How we know that? Let's show you where your problem comes at. We already know what American is. Let's look at the English American. Because we know American was preceded by English, because America don't have a language, do it? America don't have a nationality. It just said it. It don't have a race. It don't even have an ethnicity. The only thing it has is membership and permanent allegiance to the corporation. That's all it has. Now let's look at English American.
Yeah, point of interest. This ain't a slander. This is a reckoning.
A reckoning.
This is not slander. This is a reckoning. All right? We don't have time to BS, and we're not smiling. You are running around saying something that you're not. Are you a business? Are you in business? Are you doing business as an American? All right then.
Exactly.
All right. We want full payment on the debt as creditor. Back. to the de jure. Remember, they used the Eli and them, St. Clair, the original people before George Washington came into power. He was given that by John Hanson and them. So those were melanated people who were under the English crown, who went rogue, created the Republic, and then got backdoored by Thomas Jefferson and George Washington. I yield the floor.
Exactly.
Well said, CA.
And point of interest,
Go ahead.
and we're showing that anybody at this time who utilizing the status of England or the Englishmen were not the original English heirs. The original English heirs, we've been gone for quite some time at that point. Everybody at this right now is trying to utilize what we had to continue to keep breaking it down. So hopefully we didn't find ourselves to rebuild it. But that's the beautiful part about the Magna Carta. It said forever. And we know that Rome, everyone came in to utilize the principles of the Magna Carta.
Well said. I love it. I love it. I love it. Brother Holder, go ahead and read.
English Americans. English Americans are Anglo-Americans, are Americans whose ancestry originates wholly or partly in England. In the 2019 American Community Survey, 23.59 million self-identified as being of English origin.
Now, hold on. If that's the case, why ain't no English people on the damn census chart? You only got white, black,
American
African,
American Indian,
Eskimo, and other.
That's genocide.
So how in the hell did 23.59 million self-identify as being English origin? Because we just showed you America is not English, and English is not America. It was only when the Americans colonized England here, as we call America today, then we became English American. Because what does the next paragraph say, Brother Holder?
The term is distinct from British Americans.
I rest my case. It's distinct, so they're not the same.
Distinct, a very, very, very powerful word.
And remember, point of interest, Brexit just happened 3, 4, 5, 6 years ago. Brexit. You guys remember Brexit? That means that their company that was selling those TDAs across the world went bankrupt. So Brexit, the British company did its Rochambeau. Now America's time to pay up and do their Rochambeau because their accounting is off.
And quick point of interest, you just said about 6 years ago, as Archbishop said earlier, the national debt clock, that was 2014. It stopped already. That's about 6, 7 years ago.
Point of interest too, as y'all said, and as it is known, the debt clock ran up in 2014, which so happens to be the same year that Pope Francis wrote a letter to Barack Obama stating that the people of the land is supposed to get back their land.
Yeah, I wish you had that on the record.
For the people to come forth. The people are misidentifying themselves, so therefore they're not holding the original title as creditors. So therefore they're disqualifying themselves. Exactly. The de jure people have to come forward, which we are.
Yes. And read the next paragraph. Oh, Archbishop, go ahead.
No, I'm going to wait till we get to the next point in this paragraph, because it's going to be very crucial that everyone who's tuning in to pay attention, because we're going to speak about a specific surname once we get to it.
Go ahead and read, Archbishop.
Oh, you got to bring. You got to pass it. Pull it. Oh, hold on. Is that part?
Yeah, right here. That paragraph.
The majority. Okay.
Yeah.
It says the majority of the founding fathers of the United States were of English ancestry. English immigrants in the 19th century, as with other groups, saw economic prosperity.
Stop. So we just disqualify that. Remember, this is what's beautiful about the King's Bench. We don't know when a lie is being told, because English and America are distinct. They said that. English American and British America are distinct. Thomas Jefferson were those Americans who were descended down from the 13 British colonies. So how could they be English?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they took on the English surname, but they was not English.
Nope. They're showing you they're de facto and
They were
imposters.
de facto. Archbishop just said it. Let's prove it. Continue to be Archbishop.
It says they began migrating in large numbers without state support in the 1840s and contributed into the 1890s, continued into the 1890s.
Go right there.
All right, national origins. Pay attention, brothers and sisters. The ancestries of the population in the 1790. Now, y'all know what happened during this time. This is the Residency Act. This is the compromise. All of this right now that's taking place is very important for the people who used to be known as English. All right. Says the first national population census has been estimated by various sources. First in 1909, then again in 1932, 1980, and 1984. By sampling distinctive surnames in the census and assigning them a country of origin. Let me repeat this. And they did this in 1909, 1932, 1980, 1984, and they sampled distinctive surnames in the census and assigning them a country of origin. There is a debate over the accuracy between the studies, with individual scholars and the federal government using different techniques and conclusions for the ethnic composition. A study, now what they're saying.
Hold on. But remember, Americans is not associated with nationality, race, or ethnicity.
Exactly.
So they ain't talking about you.
But point of interest, you gotta pay attention. They're telling you these surnames are going back to an origin, a country of origin that has a distinct composition of a specific ethnicity.
Yes.
Your surname is the key to figure out where your ethnicity composition.
Hey, wait a minute. Hold up. Wait a minute. Hold up. Wait a minute. You mean we don't throw away our surnames?
Mm-hmm.
You mean to tell me not throwing away my surname, I can find my distinct ethnicity at which to identify myself and honor my ancestors? All right, I yield the floor.
Let's continue because it's getting good, people. A study published in 1909 titled The Century of Population Growth, from the first to the 12th census of the United States, 1790 to 1900, by the Government Census Bureau, estimated the English were 83.5%.
Wow, the first census being taken, we was 83%.
Now pay attention. It says it's from 1790 to 1900. At 83.5% is still a B. That's a B on the grade scale. So that, like you said, that's predominantly everybody out here during this time was English. 6.7% Scottish, 1.6% Irish, 2% Dutch, 0.5% French. That's crazy. 5.6% German, and 0.1% all others of the white population.
Wow. Wow.
It says Hebrews were less than 1/10 of 1% when the Scotch and Irish are added. Wow. British origins would be more than 90% of the European stock. The same 1909 data for each state of the total European population only of English stock were Connecticut, 96.2, Rhode Island, 96, Vermont, 95.4, Massachusetts, 95, New Hampshire, 94.1, Maine, 93.1, Virginia, 85, Maryland, 84, North Carolina, 83.1, South Carolina, 82.4, New York, 78.2, Pennsylvania, 59%.
Let's move down. Early history.
All right, so early settlement and colonization. English settlement in America began with Jamestown in the Virginia colony in 1607, with the permission of James I. 3 ships named the Susan Constant, the Discovery, and the Godspeed sailed from England and landed at Cape Henry in April under the captainship of Christopher Newport, who had been hired by the London Company to lead expeditions to what is now America. The second successful colony was Plymouth Colony, founded in 1620 by people who later became known as the Pilgrims. Fleeing religious persecution in East Midlands in England, they first went to Holland, but feared losing their English identity. Because of this, they chose to relocate to the New World. With their voyage being financed by English investors in September 1620, 102 passengers set sail aboard the Mayflower, eventually setting at Plymouth Colony in November. Of the passengers on the Mayflower, 41 men signed the Mayflower Compact aboard the ship on November 11th, 1620. While anchored in Provincetown Harbor, signers included Carver, Alden, Standish, Holland, Bradford, Allerton, and Fuller. This story has become a central theme in the United States cultural identity. A number of English colonies were established under a system of proprietary governors who were appointed under mercantile charters to English joint stock companies to found and run settlements. These are British people, by the way.
Now, mind you, well, Archbishop is telling you that these colonies were given authority by charters given by presumed King James I. Virginia colony and the Plymouth colony, which were revoked in 1624. And it didn't go back to King James. It went back to the Kingdom of England. And the Kingdom of England has been here from time immemorial, which ended in 1707 by the Treaty of Union, which happened to be after Queen Anne transferred to King George I. So we want to make a distinction of who these people posing as English Anglo-Saxon, because it said there was a distinction between the English or Anglo-American and British American. And we know British American were given the charter in 1606 by presumed King of England, King James VI of Scotland, and the first of England, to let colonists come over here instead of plantation to enslave the English, now called Native American, Negro, Black, Colors, Moors, etc. Go ahead, CA.
King James, who rewrote the Bible, was a Catholic. I yield.
Yes. All right.
He was the son of mother, Mary Stuart.
Yes. Well said. Political influence.
Hold on. Point of interest. Did you have something to say, Brother Holder?
This is what identity theft really looks like.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. It sure does.
Absolutely right.
So political influence. As the earliest colonists of the United States, keyword, the earliest colonists of the United States, settlers from England and their descendants. Now, these aren't English settlers. These are British.
Yeah.
All right. So British settlers and their descendants often held positions of power and made and enforced laws, often because many had been involved in government back in Britain. In the original 13 colonies, most laws contain elements found in the English common law system or British common law system, because then later ones started using that. The majority of the founding fathers of the United States were of British extraction. A minority were of high social status and can be classified as white Anglo-Saxon Protestant, WASP. Many of the pure WASP elite were loyalists who left the new nation.
Okay, stop right there. So it said many of them were extractions from the English, known as the founding fathers, because the founding fathers owe a debt to English. So how the hell could you be English and own a debt to English?
Exactly.
That don't make no sense. Straight up lies. Okay, so we want to know if these white Anglo-Saxon who are Protestant, we know Protestants were the ones who stepped the first colony of Virginia under the presumed King James of England, known as the Anglican religion, founded by Joseph of Richmond. It said that they were white Anglo-Protestant. Okay. And we know we just did a chart and it said it was 83% English and 0.1% white. So how could there be white Anglo-Saxon Protestant when the white made up only 0.1% and the English made up 83%? So y'all have to be able to see that. You just can't read something, oh, they just like, no, they're seeing how conscious you are. Because you be doing a puzzle and you got a piece that don't fit, but you still keep trying to put it in that spot knowing it don't fit. That's our problem. We keep trying to put stuff in places that it does not fit until somebody else who created the puzzle come back and show you. And that's us. Now, we were white Anglo-Saxon Protestants stem from.
It says, in the United States, white Anglo-Saxon Protestants, or WASPs, are the white American Protestant elite, typically of British descent. WASP elites have dominated American society, culture, and politics for most of the history of the United States. After 1945, many Americans criticized the WASP hegemony and disparaged them as part of the establishment. Although the social influence of wealthy WASP has declined since the 1940s, the group continues to play a central role in American finance, politics, and philanthropy.
Stop right there. Now, let's go a little further to who these people were. Start from here, name it.
Naming. The Angles and Saxons were Germanic tribes that migrated to Great Britain near the end of antiquity and the beginning of the Middle Ages. Anglian and Saxon kingdoms were established over most of what is present-day England, and collectively they came to identify themselves as English after England landed the Angles, while the indigenous Celtic people were called British. Now, this is all false, but we can continue. Later, the name Anglo-Saxon was also applied to these people, reflecting their Germanic tribal origins. And after the Norman conquest in 1066, Anglo-Saxon has been used to refer to the pre-invasion English people. The American Revolution was, in large part, rooted in the mythical ideology that the American colonists were the descendants of the Anglo-Saxons who had fled to the New World to free themselves from the British Normans.
Read that again. Read that again.
It says, rooted in a mythical ideology that the American colonists were the descendants of the Anglo-Saxons who had fled to the New World to free themselves from the British Normans. Since the 19th century, Anglo-Saxon has been in common use in English-speaking world, but not in Britain itself, to refer to Protestants of principally English descent. The W and the P were added in the 1950s to form a humorous epithet to imply waspishness or someone likely to make sharp, slightly cruel remarks.
All right, that's cool. So we see that they took over the identity of the Anglo-Saxon. These were the ones who developed what they call the Klan or the Ku Klux Klan.
Were nothing more than the descendants of Roman Catholics.
And they would usurp your bloodline and call themselves. That's why they only teach this in fraternal orders like the police union. And the police union is running around telling their members to claim Anglo-Saxon heritage. Why? Because that's where your de jure English rights are covered by the Magna Carta.
Yes, sir. Okay, all right. So we see the difference between them. All right, let's get back to here. Anglo-Spare. Oh, let's go here first. 1790 census. This is 1790, once again, the same era when the United States is being established. It says that United States Census of 1790 was the first census of the whole United States. It recorded the population of the United States as a census date, August 2nd, 1790, as mandated by Article 1, Section 2 of the United States Constitution and applicable laws. And the first census, the population of the United States was enumerated to be 3,929,214. Congress assigned responsibility for the 1790 census to the Marshal of the United States Judicial District under an act with minor modifications and extensions governed census taken until the 1840 census. The law required that every household be visited, the completed census schedule be posted in 2 of the most public places within each jurisdiction, there to remain for the inspection of all concerned, and the aggregate amount of each description of persons for each district to be transmitted to the president. So this is when they started counting the population after we all became what we call corporatized. How we know that? Let's check it out. Contemporary perception. Read that, CA.
Contemporary perceptions. Both Secretary of the State Thomas Jefferson and President George Washington, same two characters, expressed skepticism over the results, believing that the true population had been undercounted. If there was indeed an undercount, possible explanation for it include dispersed population, poor transportation links, limitation of contemporary technology, and individual refusal to participate.
Loss of that.
I don't want to be a company. I don't want to participate. Leave me out of your games.
Yeah.
Ain't that what
Loss
you
of
tell
that.
them when you say, when you go and you're trying to declare your nationality, proclaim, you say, I'm not a corporate citizen. And they say, you are. You're an American, aren't you? We have jurisdiction. How is it that you think we don't? When you have self-identified yourself as our jurisdictional property in name and likeness.
Exactly. Point of interest. That's why they don't stop them from saying, I'm an American. Okay, yeah, that's right. You are an American. We still own you.
You don't have no race or ethnicity or race or ethnicity, race or what else it said? Race, ethnicity, or what else? What's the third one? Or something else they mentioned. All right, and as a result of this
national race,
nationality, race, and ethnicity.
Yep.
Yeah. Now, this is why you're in the situation you're in. Read lost data.
Loss of data. Go ahead, CA.
Loss of data. Although the census was proved statistically factual based on the data collected, the record for the several states, including Delaware, Georgia, New Jersey, and Virginia, were lost somewhere between 1790 and 1830. Almost one third of the original census data have been lost or destroyed since the original documentation. These include some 1790 data from Connecticut, Maine, Maryland, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, New York, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, Rhode Island, South Carolina, Vermont. However, the validity and existence of most of these data can be confirmed in many secondary sources pertaining to the first census. So, point of interest, they lost all the information that called you and classified you as what you are so that they could subjugate you. They made you.
Now look at many states lost data. Delaware 1, Georgia 2, New Jersey 3, Virginia 4, Maine 5, Connecticut 6, Maryland 7, Massachusetts 8, New Hampshire 9, New York 10, North Carolina 11, Pennsylvania 12, Rhode Island 13, South Carolina 14, Vermont 15. 15 states lost data in reference to the population of the English people, which we know in 1790 was damn near 83%. Go ahead, Archbishop.
Now, point of interest, these locations are the locations where predominantly so-called Native Americans and African Americans domicile. So as you see, only thing that was taking place was is what they call paperwork genocide. They were killing us on paper, start classifying as something new. And then now when we go and try to find who we are via nationality, the farthest you get back is you're an American.
Yes. America who owns debt. And since you own debt, this is your doomsday. Why? Yeah. Because the national debt clock or the debt clock is also called the doomsday clock. Read what that says, Archbishop.
All right. The doomsday clock is a symbol that represents the likelihood of a man-made global catastrophe. Maintained since 1947 by the members of the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists, the clock is a metaphor for threats to humanity from unchecked scientific and technical advances.
Okay, that's called the doomsday clock. Now let's go back to the debt clock and see if they don't call it the doomsday clock, because we know time is running out. Look at the state the world is. All time devastation, earthquakes, tsunamis, hurricanes, etc. Now let's look at this dead clock and see if they don't mention the doomsday clock. It says the idea of conveying a message through a periodically updated clock found in early expression and a doomsday clock. However, the innovation of the natural death clock was to feature a constant running calendar. So they also always made kept check of what was going on in the world, because time was running the hell out. How do we know that? Because of the doomsday book going way back to
William the Conqueror.
William the Conqueror in 1066. He created the doomsday, and they made reference to the king's land.
Yep.
This is going to be beautiful, y'all.
Book. And point of interest, you want to make sure your name is in that Domesday book, your family surname, because like you said, that Domesday book was a ledger regarding all of the property that the king have gave to people throughout the realm. And if you wanted to know if your family was part of that, because like the king is saying, everything got to go back to the English people, but you need to be able to verify that you go back to time immemorial. And within that Domesday book, some of our family names are in there. I verified my family surname is in there because many of them fought alongside William the Conqueror.
It's very important to understand that time, because we know at this time this would result in what they call the schism. The East and West schisms of the Roman Catholic and the Eastern Orthodox churches misdirecting the English citizens of where they stem from in regards to their history in lieu of the martyrs, saints concerning the mysteries of our Jesus Christ, which is none other than King Edward the Peaceful, which history was covered in lieu of the Doomsday Book by way of William the Conqueror through the invasion of England, and which was encompasses with the kings and queens of the houses of Wessex, which goes back to King Alfred the Great. And Alfred the Great means wise elf, i.e. elves of Albion, Great Britain. All right, which King Edward the Peaceful was the emperor of Albion. All right, so this Doomsday Book, remember, we're saying that as a result of our condition today, as a result of not knowing who we are and who we descended down from, in lieu of the martyrs, saints, concerning the mysteries of Jesus Christ, which is no other than King Edward the Peaceful. And as a result of Norman invasion in England, not just in England, but in the Eastern Hemisphere and the Western Hemisphere, because we know that normally stemmed from the Bourbon dynasty, which became the Capetine dynasty, which descended down from the Carolingian dynasty, which descended down from the Merovingian dynasty, which never claimed to be descendants of God. Why? Because they descended from the Clovis culture, which were actually here in North America, if you know your history. So this is go ahead, CA.
I just want to make speak it in layman's terms to our peepers and viewers. When you say of Normans, you think of Vikings. You think of Eric the Red, Leif the Lucky. Remember, they had been the people that they said were who came to the American territories. So if they're in England and America, then it would be known in that time, since time immemorial, of this land. I'm telling you that people in England knew about the Americas, and people in America knew about England since time immemorial. How do we know? Because the Normans traveled to both places.
Mm-hmm.
I yield.
Yes, sir. Well said. Brother Earl Burgess.
Want me to read?
Yes, sir.
Who's better, bro?
Want me to zoom in? Okay. Doomsday Book. The Middle English spelling of Doomsday Book is a manuscript record of the Great Survey of much of the England and parts of Wales, completed in 1086 by the order of William I, known as William the Conqueror. Doomsday has long been associated with the Latin phrase Domus Dei, meaning house of God. The manuscript is also known by the Latin name Liber di Wintonia, meaning Book of Winchester. The Anglo-Saxon Chronicle states that in 1085, the king sent his agents to survey each shire in England. to list his holdings and calculate the dues owed to him. Written in medieval Latin, it was highly abbreviated and included some bigger vernacular native terms without Latin equivalents. The survey's main purpose was to determine what tax had been owed during the reign of King Edward the Confessor, thereby allowing William to reassert the right of the crown, and as is where power lay after a. Can you scroll the screen down some for me?
Okay. That's good.
Yeah. Hold on, where was that? The medieval Latin.
Right there.
Power lays after wholesale redistribution of land following the Norman conquest.
Stop right there. Okay, so we're talking about the Doomsday Book. Let's go to the name. We know it makes reference to the king and his property, i.e. land. Let's go to the naming of it. What does it say?
The manuscript does not carry a formal title. The work is referred to internally as a descriptio in Roland and in other early administrative contexts as the king's writing. From about 1100, reference appears to the Liber Book or Carter Charter of Winchester is unusual place of custody, and from the mid-12th to the early 13th centuries to the Winchester or King's Roads, to the English who held the book and all to become known as Doomsday Book, in allusion to the Last Judgment, and then specific reference to the definitive character of the record. The word doom was the usual Old English term for a law or judgment. It did not carry a modern overtones of fatality or disaster. Excuse me. Richard Fitznail, Treasurer of England under Henry II, explained the name connotations in detail in the dialogue de
Scascaria. Yeah.
The book is metaphorically called by the native English Doomsday, an example, the Day of Judgment, for the sentence of that strict and terrible last account cannot be evaded by any skillful subterfuge. So when this book is appealed to on those matters which is contained, its sentence cannot be squashed or set aside with impunity. That is why we call the book of Judgment, not because it contains decisions or various difficult points, but because the decision, like those of the Last Judgment, are unalterable.
Okay. So, all right. So it says that the Doomsday Book, which is the book concerning the king's property, is a book that's unalterable because the Jews is also returned the day of Last Judgment. So let's see, because it mentions Henry II. This is the King of England, son of John, who wrote the Magna Carta, is it not?
Sure is.
Correct.
Let's just look. Richard. 1 second. I'm sorry.
Point of interest.
Godfrey. His father's Godfrey. Henry II, father of Godfrey, 5th Caliban Jew, where I descended down from.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So we're talking about Doomsday Book, known as in the book of the Bible called the Day of Judgment. Right? In reference to Henry II, the son of Godfrey, the 5th Caliban Jew, concerning the king's property. Go ahead, CA.
And to me, what rings out in my thoughts is that he said, I didn't come to do away with the law, but to fulfill it. He was not
Fulfill the law.
changing the law. He did the Norman Conquest. He didn't change the law, implement the law, or establish, or he didn't change the law or create it. It had already been established before him. What he did was enforce it so that he could understand what was under the king's jurisdiction, so that he could impose taxes and redistribute land and wealth. So he didn't come to do away with the law, but to fulfill it.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Underneath
Yeah.
the order confessory.
Yes, sir. And what is confessorate? Yes, sir. All right. So we know that the Doomsday Book is called the Last Judgment. Let's see what that is, according to all these Christians. Read that.
The last judgment, final judgment day of a reckoning, day of judgment, judgment day, doomsday, or the day of the Lord. Some Christians and Islamic denominations consider the second coming of Christ to be the final and definitive judgment by God of the people of every nation, resulting in the approval of some of the resulting in the approval of some and the penalizing of others.
Stop. Okay. So that's what the Doomsday Book, for the judgment of some and the approval of others. Because a lot of them are on the king's land without the right to be here.
Exactly.
That's why the Doomsday would actually sit there. So on that day of judgment, that final day of judgment, it means the return of the king's land. You don't know what that means? Let's get a little bit of understanding about that. Read that. 1 second. Now remember, we're going all the way back to the Doomsday Book, William the Conqueror, who invaded England. And he's speaking about the last day of judgment, which is called the Book of Revelations. Am I right?
Mm-hmm.
Correct.
So we're actually explaining the Book of Revelations, which is the prophetic book, in a concrete standpoint, but make reference to this day and time right here today. Why? Because I'm descendant of Godfrey the Fifth Caliban Jew, which the Doomsday Book spoke about Godfrey's son, Henry II, who is also a relative of one who wrote the Magna Carta, which our rights is preserved under. Go ahead, Archbishop.
And in point of interest, to come back off of that, I was going to say that how we know the William the Conqueror himself was also too working for Rome at this point. Now, when he's working for Rome, because when he brought in the feudal rule. Now, when he brought in the feudal rule, but he's also too enforcing the rule of Edward the Confessor. Now, just letting you know that Rome recognizes English law and still working with English law in conjunction for them to even exist, which means that the devil has to honor God.
Mm-hmm.
God's law was honored all the way up until 1974 or 75, when they so-called stopped honoring Edward Confessori.
Yeah.
Like the king is saying, what's going on now is it's about to be revealed based off of the devil still keeping up God's rule, also God's law was God's property, but now those descendants who have benefited off of the devil are going to now have to answer to who the devil was actually working for the whole time, which is God.
Yeah. Yes. Now, y'all, boy, all those who feel this, y'all better clap your hands when y'all finish seeing this. Read. Now, we're talking about the Doomsday Book from William the Conqueror back in 1066, in that era. Mm-hmm. And he's mentioned, they're talking about the return of talking about the last day of judgment of the Son of Man, i.e. Jesus Christ, who I'm the reincarnation of, in King Edgar the Peaceful. Now, we talk about the descendant of Godfrey now. We're talking about the last day of judgment, which make reference to Henry II, the son of Godfrey the Fifth Caliban Jew, who I'm in reincarnation, who I descended down from for my agnetic succession. So this is dealing with the return of the land in 1873, which make reference to the Doomsday Book of 1086. Read what this says, Archbishop.
It says, the 2-volume Return of the Owners of Land, 1873, is the first complete picture of the... Hold on, before I go into... Remember, 2 years from now, this is when so-called African Americans got freed. But let's continue. It's the first complete picture of the distribution of land in Great Britain since the 1086 Domesday Book. The 1873 return is sometimes called the modern Domesday. It arose from the desire of the Victorian governing landed classes, many of whom sat in the House of Lords, to counter rising public clamor encouraged by the press about what was considered the monopoly of land.
Stop. Okay, so it says 1873, a modern day dooms book that arose from the desires of the Victorian age. This is 1873, Queen Victoria's rule. Now, this stems all the way back from William the Conqueror, the Doomsday Book, 1086, all the way up to the time era of Queen Victoria. Now, read what they say, and we're talking about return of the King's land. Let's go to England and Wales. Read what that said. Hold on.
Point of interest, they also said they were comprised of the House of Lords, so they're letting
House
you
of
know
Lords.
that they were not a part of the monarchical family, but this is where the coup d'etat started.
Read England and Wales.
It says, the return was published in 1875 and sold for 10 S6D, which is equivalent to 49 pounds in 2018, each in 2 leather-bound volumes, edited by John Lambert of England and Wales, exclusive of the metropolis. Return of the Owners of Land, 1873, presented in both Houses of Parliament by command of Her Majesty, London, printed by George Edward Eyre and William Spotswood, printers to the Queen's Most Excellent Majesty for Her Majesty's Stationery Office, 1875.
Okay, so this is dealing with Queen Victoria. Queen Victoria, 1875. All right, let's go here. Hold on. Let's go ahead.
Now, point of interest, this is all still underneath the donors conditionalibus.
Yes, yes. So we're talking about the Doomsday Book, known as the Return of the King's Land. All right, let's go here. Crack a doom. Read this. This is the last day of judgment.
In English. Oh, you want to go?
No, you go ahead.
Yeah. All right. So crack of doom. In English, crack of doom is an old English term used for the day of judgment, referring in particular to the blast of trumpets, signaling the end of the world in chapter 8 of the book of Revelation. I will read that again. In English, crack of doom is the old term used for the day of judgment, referring in particular to the blast of trumpets, signaling the end of the world in chapter 8 of the book of Revelation. A crack had the sense of any loud noise, preserved in the phrase crack of thunder, and doom was termed for the last judgment as doomsday still is. The phrase is famously used by William Shakespeare in Macbeth, where on the heath of 3 witches show Macbeth the line of kings that will ensue from Banquo. Why do you show me this? A 4th, start eyes. What? Will the line stretch out to the crack of doom? Another yet, a 7th, I'll see no more. Act 4, scene 1, 112 to 117. The meaning was that Banquo's line will endure until the judgment day. Flattery for King James I, who claimed descent from Banquo.
Okay, so here we see Revelations, the day of judgment, concerning the Doomsday Book, going back to William the Conqueror, and it's called the Crack of Doom. That makes reference to the flattery of King James, who was not a king of England, but descended from Banquo. Now, who is this Banquo?
Yeah, let's see who is.
Lord Banquo, the Thane of Lochaber, is a character in William Shakespeare's 1606 play Macbeth. In the play, he is at first an ally of Macbeth. Both are generals in the king's army, and they meet the three witches together. After prophesying that Macbeth will become king, the witches tell Banquo that he will not be king himself, but that his descendants will be. Later, Macbeth, in his lust for power, sees Banquo as a threat and has him murdered by 3 hired assassins. Banquo's son, Fleance, escapes. Banquo's ghost returns in a later scene, causing Macbeth to react with alarm during a public feast.
Don't worry about that.
Shakespeare.
Let's skip that.
Okay.
All right. So we're dealing with King James, who descended down from Banquo. Now, King James claimed to be the first king of England and the king of Scotland. Now, the word Banquo is a name that originated from Scotland. All right. Macbeth descended down from Germany. All right. Mac, that's a Scottish name. Mac, Beth. All right. So now what's very important because they're making reference to King James in lieu of the Doomsday Book, i.e. the Day of Judgment, which was making reference to the book that William the Conqueror created in 1086. Make sense? So it says Return of the King's Land. It said Return was published in 1875 under the Parliament of the House of Parliament under Queen Victoria. It also said it right here. It said it arose from the desire of the Victorian governing landed classes, many of who sat the House of Lords, to counter rising public clamor, encouraging the press about what's considered the monopoly of land. Why is this important? Why? Let me show you. Read what that says. This is a 2013 statute. It's 2022, 2021. They just got 2013. But read what it says.
Universal citation, New Jersey Reserve Stat, subsection 16-1-28-2013. 16-128, saving the rights under charter granted by Great Britain. Rev 1877, page 960, section 12, CSP 4311, section 12, being section 12 of an act entitled An Act to Incorporate the Trustees of Religious Societies, approved April 9th, 1875, saved from repeal.
Stop. Let's go back here. Return of the owner of the land. What year did they say this was in England and Wales? 1875.
1875.
All right, so this is prophecy right now. The return of the king's land will be done as ordered by the statute 16:1-28 in lieu of prophecy that was told in Revelations as mentioned by King James. And we know King James goes back to the Doomsday Book because the Doomsday Book was written by the House of Tudors. What it says here, Great Doomsday Book in its Tudor binding and wood engraving in 1860. So the House of Tudors knew what was going on. So according to Title 61-28, the king's land will be returned by way of the statute protected by the charter. And the charter goes back to King John, the brother of Henry II, the son of Godfrey V, Count of Anjou, and which I am descended down from. Why? Because I recovered this information in regards to the debt that they owe. What debt that they owe? The debt that must be given back to the creditors. How do we know that? Let's go here. And this is coming to our closing. That. Let me blow this up. Read this, Archbishop.
All right. House Resolution 807 to establish the office to enforce and protect against child sexual exploitation. In the House of Representatives, February 4th, 2021.
Hold on, wrong one. I'm sorry. Sorry about that. I got the wrong one. Second.
Yep, that's the right one.
All right, here we go. Read that form.
House Resolution 807 in the Senate of the United States, May 13, 2013, received, read twice, and referred to the Committee on Finance. It's an act to require that the government prioritize all obligations on the debt held by the public in the event that the debt limit is reached. It is enacted by the Senate and the House of Representatives of the United States of America and Congress assembled.
Wow.
Section 1, short title. This act may be cited as the Full Faith and Credit Act. Section 2, payment of principal and interest on public debt and Social Security trust funds. In general, in the event that the debt of the United States government as defined in Section 3101 of the Title 31, United States Code reaches the statutory limit, the Secretary of Treasury shall, in addition to any other authority provided by law, issue obligations under Chapter 31 of Title 31, United States Code, to pay with legal tender and solely for the purpose of paying the principal and interest on obligations of the United States, described B, after the date of the enactment of this act. Obligations described for the purpose of this subsection, obligations described in the subsection are obligations which are 1, held by the public, or 2, held by the Old Age and Survivors Insurance Trust Fund and Disability Insurance Trust Fund. C, prohibition on compensation for members of Congress. None of the obligations issued under subsection A may be used to pay compensation for members of Congress. Obligations exempt from the public, from public debt. 2, limit obligations issued under subsection A shall not be taken into account in applying the limitation in section 3101B of Title 31. United States Code to the extent that such obligations will otherwise cause the limitations in section 3101B of Title 31, United States Code to be exceeded.
Okay, so section Title 31, United States Code 3101B should not be disturbed, altered, repealed, etc. All right, point 8.
Point A, the principal on mature obligations and interest that is due or accrued of the United States. And B, any obligations issued pursuant to subsection A. 2, submission. The report required by paragraph 1 should be submitted to the Committee on Ways and Means of the House of Representatives and the Committee on Finance of the Senate. Passed the House of Representatives May 9th, 2013. Karen L. Haas, clerk.
Okay, so as of 2013, this bill was passed the day after it went into effect in regards to full faith and credit given to the public on the debt that was secured on behalf of the citizens. When we say public, we know that they're talking about individual groups of people. We know that state and church been separated, so there are individual groups of people and the religious society versus the state. But we know that the state, i.e. United States citizens, were the ones who were subject to the debt accumulated by the states as United States persons, which are securities on lieu of the interest created by the credit extended to the United States and the United States citizens, which full faith and credit should be given by the United States as well as the United States citizen to the creditor, which are the English citizens, because without the English government citizens, you will have no English government, i.e. the English bank. So this speaks to the obligation that United States have in regards to full faith and credit to the so-called citizens who credited the United States government and the citizens in lieu of the debt that they owe to us, i.e. the English citizen. How we know that? Let's go here in closing. Title 31, Section 301, 3101, Section A and B. Archbishop.
It says, in this section, the current redemption value of an obligation issued on a discount basis and redeemable before maturity at the option of its holder is deemed to be the face amount of the obligation. B, the face amount of obligations issued under this chapter and the face amount of obligations whose principal and interest are guaranteed by the United States government, except guaranteed obligations held by the Secretary of the Treasury, may not be more than $14,294 billion. Outstanding at one time, subject to the changes periodically made in that amount as provided by law through the congressional budget process described in Rule XLI, was that 39? Oh, yeah, 39 of Rules of the House Representative, or is provided by Section 3101A or otherwise.
Okay, that's enough. And as we can see here, what we just read in the statute is what they say right here. Section 31 of Title 31 United States Code. So when they speak about Title 31 United States Code 3101 A and B, they're speaking about the debt, the national debt that the government of the United States, as well as the citizens, by way of what they call intergenerational equity by sweat, they're obligated, their sweat interiors by way of being corporatized by state-owned enterprises or government-owned enterprises so that the debt could be transferred from them to the citizens. In lieu of the debt that they assume on what we call credit. Pay it back at a later date. And as they said, the deadline has passed. So we're supposed to be collecting our parts of our full faith and credit since 2013. But nobody have done so. Why? Because they ain't the ones that be supposed to be collecting it. It's us, the English heirs. Why? Because according to Queen Victoria, she stated that return of the Queen's land will be in 1875. 1875 was the enactment of Title 60, Chapter 1, Section 28, rights in the Charters of Great Britain. And we know that those rights in Great Britain go back to the charters of 1606, 1763, etc. So all these are not only involve the money or the legal tender that we lend them, as well as the property, because the creditor lends out property, services, and property, services, and money, currency. And we know the only money that there is gold and silver, which is covered under the Charter of 1606. That clearly states that under the Charter of 1606, the colonists, i.e. the plantations who came over here by way of the charter, were allowed to yield by way of mining for gold, silver, as well as use of the so-called land, etc. But you must yield it for the heirs and the successors, based off the deadline that were given to you, which the deadline was 2014, as stated in the statute. So therefore, it clearly states that any trickery done upon the original contract, i.e. the charter, will be a violation of it, and all things created in lieu of that violation of the charter, i.e. 1606, would become null and void. So it clearly violated the charter by not paying us back like they should have done in 2013, but as well as violating the contract pertaining to Article 1, Section 10, that the only way that we can pay our debts is with gold and silver, because it clearly says that there's no corporation and no financial bank are to be instituted, as the founding fathers said. But yet, they did contrary to their obligation, and therefore they must be found guilty according to a record of law. So that is this lesson. It just shows you that we are not the debtors, but we are the creditors. And when we say creditors, we are the ones that the United States and the citizens owe. So you have to be a part of the church, because as part of the church, we are an individual group of people who are subject to our race, our ethnicity, and our nationality. contrast to those who are who are American citizens with only oaths to their allegiance to their founding fathers and their oath to that flag, which means that in its entirety, you are debtors.
You're debtors.
You are debtors. We have proven it beyond a reasonable doubt that according to Title 31, Section 3101, Section A and B, that we are owed 14 trillion some odd dollars. And we want legal tender. If we can't get that, we want full faith and credit. So with that, I leave our closing remarks to Archbishop Belmont and C.A. Coadjutor, as well as the other esquires who are earls on the King's Bench today. I digress.
Well, there you have it, brothers and sisters. Once again, we told you this path was straight and narrow. It wasn't going to be many different paths that was going to lead to the same result or resolution in this case. Only the English heirs are the true creditors and the true beneficiaries to what all of you have been utilizing in error. We should be, or like the king said, we should have been returned what was due to us. But unfortunately, since we've been led astray by many sellouts, it took this long for it to happen. According to prophecy, we're right on time. You know, it's not going to be many brothers and sisters who are ready for this. Like we say, only 144,000. So as we're showing you that we're getting ready to set sail to back onto the land of England or the kingdom of Albion or empire of Albion. If you're not on this ship, this ark, you ain't going. Your fate has been sealed. Because like we say, we've been here long enough, we have our first fruits. If you are one of the so-called chosen ones, you have been up here too. But as we listen to you desecrate the English language, the English history, and mock your ancestors, your English ancestors, only thing we can do is just turn our back on you and walk towards the light that gave us life. If you want to be there with us, you'll do the same thing. We're not here to hold anybody's hand because you're all supposed to be considered adults. The way you act, the way you treat each other, in my eyes, you're supposed to be an adult, even though you're acting like children where it went feral and astray. If you think that money and gold is going to save your problems, you're kidding. Because we keep showing you this is just only a resource to help us. But only thing it's going to do is magnify what's already within you. If you have a black tainted heart, this money is not going to fix your problems. Gold is not going to fix your problems. You need to heal yourself from within, heal your gut, so therefore you can heal your mind. And then when you start healing your mind, hopefully you'll stop letting yourself being led astray with your emotions, because that's what many brothers and sisters right now are being led by how they feel. How I feel is all part of the serpentine cult. It's that emotional energy within you. We're coming to bring you something that has nothing to do with how you feel. It's concrete. It's based off of land. It's based off of agnatic succession, just sanguinis. So if you don't want to be part of the order that your ancestors set, then you're considered out of order, outlaw, godless people, and there's nothing we can do for you. So with that being said, I'll leave the rest of the closing to our coadjutor as well our brothers from their respective houses. I digress.
Well said, Archbishop. Well said. Excellent demonstration. Excellent body of knowledge and work and explanation by the King's Bench, and give high honors to our King Clifford Jefferson from the House of Plantagenet. Show me the money.
Word up.
I mean, what else do y'all need to see, bruh? Like, listen, nobody's playing with you. We love you. We come to share the truth. We do this under our own fruition, our own volition, our own free will. We don't get paid for this. Ain't nobody donating. This is just love. What you got was hit with a bunch of information and love. We went through revelations. We went through statutes. We went through history. All this to explain to you what you are inheriting of. Now, we can take you to water, but we can't make you drink. With that being said, you know, the King and Archbishop, with the help of the King's Bench, did a marvelous job at explaining where it is that your estate lies, who are the creditors, who the debitors, and what your responsibilities are in lieu of your self-classification and identification. All right. You are what you say you are. We recognize that. So then if you're an American, go ahead, gather up your funds and bring them on over so we can get our collection. You know what I'm talking about? We love you dearly, but again, you don't acknowledge me in front of your friends and peers. I won't acknowledge you in front of my Father. All right? That's how this goes. We love you dearly, but nobody's playing with you. We come to learn, we come to share this truth so that we all can have our salvation or heaven on earth, as it were. That national debt clock constantly goes up because your de facto Senate and legislators regulated so erroneously. And all we've done is come to recognize our true ancestral inheritance through the heirs and successors so that they may place their feet firmly on the foundation of the charters granted before, the royal charters granted before them. So, I mean, I could say more, but it's already been said. So I love you dearly. This is your brother from the House of Murphy, signing off, sending you much love and saying all you're getting, get overstanding of your true ancestral estate so that you can honor your foremothers and forefathers so that you can be implanted long life and liberty and happiness on this earth, here and now, tangible, not abstract. Love.
Well said.
Well said, CA. Well said.
Brother Holder.
Yes, angels. So as y'all have seen, heard, and willfully shown that there's only one creditor, there's only one set of heirs. This explains a lot to why a lot of people who claim to be collecting the debt doesn't collect the debt, because they are not the rightful heirs to the debt, to the inheritance that comes from the debtors. With that being said, it was a beautiful, wonderful, and marvelous lesson that has been brought forth to you by the King, Archbishop Belmont, Bishop Murphy, the Esquires, Simpson, Brother Simpson, and Brother Burgess. Can't forget Brother Burgess. This was a wonderful, a magnanimous, a magnificent, and wonderful lesson that has been brought to you for free, as the brother told you, because we love y'all. We care about y'all. We care about your well-being. We care about your mental health. We care about your health. But however, as it is said and as it is known, you can only take the horse to the water, but you can't make it drink. So at the end of the day, we brought you the water. We brought you the water in buckets. We didn't even bring you to the river. We brought the river to you. All you have to do is make up your mind to drink it. That's it.
Mm-hmm. Well said. Well said, Brother Holder. Brother Earl Simpson, Esquire.
Thank you, King. Thank you. I just want to say thank you, Archbishop, Coadjutor, and the King for this marvelous lesson that you have brought us today. This has been just a great lesson. Like, as we look back from a higher seat of perspective, you know, we look at the things that go on in our day-to-day life. We use credit, we use debit, all the things that we do in our day-to-day life. And, you know, the real and true aspect and where it comes from, the roots of it all, you know, and where it stems from, we get to see where that comes from. And this is really you, the angels, the English men and women, breaking the generational curses that comes with, you know, the past, the things that we have been, what's the word I'm looking for, subject to. This is what you have been subject to, and this is the curse that you need to break. So before you can become rich or successful, however you want to look at that, right? You always have to do that in the mind first. Know who you are.
Mm-hmm.
Know your roots. Know where you come from. Predestination. It all starts up here first. Don't forget that. Peace and love, your brother and Earl Simpson.
Well said, Earl.
Well said, Earl Simpson.
And last but least, my jiu-jitsu friend, Esquire Earl Burger from the House of Burgers. Speak your mind, Noble.
Blessings, angels. I say this every week. I really can't express enough how much I appreciate the Third Temple Church, my king, my archbishop, my earls. A lot's been revealed to me. You know what I mean? And I'm gonna continue to do this work. I hope y'all was able to make the connections, because this is going on with this right here. What we were speaking about is what's going on right now, where you can make the connection. So come on home so we can do this work together. I love y'all.
Well said.
Well said.
We have heard it from the King's bench. The King's bench only echo what the king say, and the king only echoes what our ancestors say, and our ancestors say, come home. Come home. You realize that, you know, as an American citizen, you're going to be debtors for life. And the only way to come back to life is to be creditors. And the only way to be creditors is to return back to your estate, which belongs to you, have always been yours, and forever will be, if you just return to that of an Englishman. So with that, we'll greet you in the name of love, truth, peace, freedom. And as we all know, freedom is justice. You know, we love all our brothers, as Moorish Americans, Negroes, Black, colored Ethiopians, legal persons, corporations, partnerships, association. We need y'all, you know, but with great, great power comes great
responsibility.
You know what I'm saying? And like I said, you know, our ancestors are the reason why we're doing what we're doing, and it don't cost us anything. Why? Because it didn't cost them anything. You know, what cost is you living up to what it has been given to you. Because like I said, with great power comes great responsibility. And responsibility in lieu of that power comes from the source. And you only get strongest as the source. So with that, we're going to say peace and love.
Peace and love.
Peace.
Blessings.
Peace.